Chapter 15. It wasn't until dark came that I really began to get uneasy about Mama and Lisbeth. Then I could hardly stand it because they hadn't come home. I knew in my own mind why they hadn't. It had been late when they'd started out, they'd had a good long piece to go, and even with wood handy it took considerable time to drag up enough for the size fire they needed. And I couldn't think of any real danger to them. They weren't far enough away from the cabin to be lost, and if they were, Jumper knew the way home. Also, Jumper was gentle. There wasn't much chance that he'd scare and throw them off. On top of all that, they had Old Yeller along. Old Yeller might be pretty weak and crippled yet, but he'd protect them from just about anything that might come their way. Still, I was uneasy. I couldn't help having the feeling that something was wrong. I'd have gone to see about it if it hadn't have been for little Arliss. It was past his supper time. He was getting hungry and sleepy and fussy. So I took him and the speckled pup inside the kitchen and lit a candle, settled them on the floor, and gave them each a bowl of sweet milk into which I crumbled cold cornbread. In a little bit, both were eaten out of the same bowl. Little Arliss knew better than that, and I ought to have paddled him for doing it. But I didn't. I didn't say a word. I was too worried. I'd just about made up my mind to put little Arliss and the pup to bed and go look for Mama and Lisbeth when I heard a sound that took me to the door in a hurry. The sound of dogs fighting. The sound came from way out there in the dark, but the minute I stepped outside I could tell that the fight was moving toward the cabin. Also, I recognized the voice of Old Yeller. It was the sort of raging yell he let out when he was in a fight to the finish. It was the same savage roaring and snarling and squalling he'd done the day he fought the killer hogs off me. The sound of it chilled my blood. I stood rooted to the ground, trying to think what it could be, what I ought to do. Then I heard Jumper snorting keenly and Mama calling in a frightened voice, "Travis, Travis, make a light, son, and get your gun. Hurry!" I came alive then. I hollered back at her to let her know that I'd heard. I ran back into the cabin and got my gun. I couldn't think at first what would make the sort of light I needed, then recollected a clump of bear grass that Mama had recently grubbed out where she wanted to start a new fall garden. Bear grass has an oily sap that makes it burn bright and fierce for a long time. A pile of it burning would make a big light. I ran and snatched up 4 bunches of the half-dried bear grass. The sharp ends of the stiff blades stabbed and stung my arms and chest as I grabbed them up. But I had no time to bother about that. I ran and dumped the bunches in a pile on the bare ground outside the yard fence, then hurried to bring a live coal from the fireplace to start them burning. I fanned fast with my hat. The bear grass blades started the smoking, giving off their foul smell. A little flame started, flickered, and wavered for a moment, then bloomed suddenly and leaped high with a roar. I jumped back, gun held ready, and caught my first glimpse of the screaming, howling battle that came wheeling into the circle of light. It was Old Yeller, all right, tangled with some animal as big and savage as he was. Mama called from outside the light's rim, "Careful, son, take close aim. It's a big lofer wolf gone mad." My heart nearly quit on me. There wasn't many of the gray lofer wolves in our part of the country, but I knew about them. They were big and savage enough to hamstring a horse or drag down a full-grown cow. And here was Old Yeller, weak and crippled, trying to fight a mad one. I brought up my gun, then held fire while I hollered at Mama. "Y'all get in the cabin," I yelled. "I'm scared to shoot till I know you're out of the line of fire." I heard Mama whacking Jumper with a stick to make him go. I heard Jumper snorting the clatter of his hooves as he went galloping in a wide circle to come up behind the cabin. Even after Mama called from the door behind me, I still couldn't fire, not without taking a chance on killing Old Yeller. I waited, my nerves on edge, while Old Yeller and the big wolf fought there in the firelight, whirling and leaping and snarling and slashing, their bared fangs gleaming white, their eyes burning green in the half-light. Then they went down in a tumbling roll that stopped with the big wolf on top, his huge jaws shut tight on Yeller's throat. That was my chance, and one that I'd better make good. As weak as Old Yeller was, he'd never break that throat hold. There in the wavering light, I couldn't get a true beat on the wolf. I couldn't set my sights well enough. All I could do was guess aim and hope for a hit. I squeezed the trigger. The gunstock slammed back against my shoulder, and such a long streak of fire spouted from the gun barrel that it blinded me for a second. I couldn't see a thing. Then I realized that all the growling and snarling had hushed. A second later, I was running toward the 2 still gray forms lying side by side. For a second, I just knew I'd killed Old Yeller, too. Then, about the time I bent over him, he heaved a big sort of sigh and straggled up to start licking my hands and wagging that stub tail. I was so relieved it seemed like all the strength went out of me. I slumped to the ground and was sitting there shivering when Mama came and sat down beside me. She put one arm across my shoulders and held it there while she told me what had happened. Like I'd figured it had taken her and Lisbeth till dark to get the wood dragged up and the fire going around the dead cow. Then they'd mounted old Jumper and headed for home. They'd been without water all this time and were thirsty. When they came to the crossing on Birdsong Creek, they dismounted to get a drink. While they were lying down drinking, the wolf came. He was right on them before they knew it. Mama happened to look up and see the dark hulk of him come bounding toward them across a little clearing, snarling as he came. Mama just barely had time to come to her feet and grab up a dead China berry pole before he sprang. She whacked him hard across the head, knocking him to the ground. Then old Yeller was there, tying into him. Mama and Lisbeth got back on Jumper and tore out for the house. Right after them came the wolf, like he had his mind fixed on catching them and nothing else. But old Yeller fought him too hard and too fast. Yeller wasn't big and strong enough to stop him, but he kept him slowed down and fought away from Jumper and Mama and Lisbeth. He had to have been mad, son, Mama wound up. You know that no wolf in his right senses would have acted that way. Not even a big lofer wolf. Yes'm, I said, and it's sure a good thing that old Yeller was along to keep him fought off. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened without old Yeller. Mama waited a little bit and said in a quiet voice, "It was a good thing for us, son, but it wasn't good for old Yeller." The way she said that gave me a cold feeling in the pit of my stomach. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" I said. "Old Yeller's all right. He's maybe chewed up some, but he can't be bad hurt. See, he's done trotting off toward the house." And then it hit me what Mama was getting at. All my insides froze, and I couldn't get my breath. I jumped to my feet, wild with hurt and scare. "But, Mama," I cried out, "old Yeller's just saved your life. He saved my life. He saved little Arliss's life. We can't." Mama got up and put her arm across my shoulders again. "I know, son," she said, "but he's been bitten by a mad wolf." I started off into the blackness of the night while my mind wheeled and darted this way and that like a scared rat trying to find its way out of a trap. "But, Mama," I said, "we don't know for certain. We can wait and see. We can tie him up or shut him up in the corn crib or someplace till we know for sure." Mama broke down and went to crying then. She put her head on my shoulder and held me so tight she nearly choked off my breath. "We can't take a chance, son," she sobbed. "It would be you or me or little Arliss or Lisbeth next. I'll shoot him if you can't, but either way we got to do it. We just can't take the chance." It came clear to me then that Mama was right. We couldn't take the risk. From everything I had heard, I knew that there was very little chance of old Yeller's escaping the sickness. It was going to kill something inside me to do it. But I knew then that I had to shoot my big yeller dog. Once I knew for sure I had to do it, I don't think I really felt anything. I was just numb all over, like a dead man walking. Quickly I left Mama and went to stand in the light of the burning bear grass. I reloaded my gun and called old Yeller back from the house. I stuck the muzzle of the gun against his head, and I pulled the trigger.